Hello, it is December 23rd, Christmas Eve, happy Christmas Eve, and I am headed out to pick up my very last Christmas gift of 2023. I don't normally last minute Christmas shop like this, and I'm not actually like going shopping right now, although there is one more thing I'll look for at the place where we're going. I'm actually just picking up a gift that I've already purchased. One of our favorite local used bookstores does a Christmas book bundle. It's based on the, I think it's like Finnish or Norwegian or Icelandic, I think it is, tradition of reading books on Christmas Eve, although we won't open ours until Christmas Day with the rest of our gifts. I looked up how to say this word and now I'm afraid I'm not going to remember it. It's something like Julebukaflod. That sounds so bad. That's not right at all. But it is the tradition of exchanging books on Christmas Eve and spending like that evening time reading. So like I said, we won't open ours till Christmas Day, but they do these book bundles in honor of that, and Florence and I, this is the third year in a row now that we've each gotten one for each other. And so we are meeting up in Mount Airy to pick up our book bundles for each other. I'm going to do a little bit of browsing around the bookstore as well. Like I said, I thought of something else that I might want to pick up if it's there. And then we're going to get some lunch together. And when I come back in the afternoon, I get to film what might be, in terms of a second-year tradition, my favorite video to film in Vlogmas, which is me putting together my 2024 TBR shelf. I have the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge list all ready to go, and I'm going to go through my bookshelves and put together books that I think will work for that. And then in the evening, Florence and I are getting together again, this time in my neck of the woods, to go out to dinner and see a local production of A Christmas Carol. This is the one I see every year on December 23rd. So it is going to be an incredibly festive day, full of sister time. It's going to be amazing. I am so excited that you're coming along with us. I am reminded as I make this trip of the reason why I don't usually like to drive around on December 23rd. It's a Saturday, so everyone is leaving today for their holiday vacations or time with their family, or they're doing their last minute Christmas shopping. Getting out of my town, where I have to pass like interstate exits and shopping centers and things like that, was horrible. And there's still, if I look southbound on the other side of the street, there's like nobody practically. But coming northbound, there are so many cars. We are finally in the like countryside area where it's not quite as bad. But yeah, there's just a lot of cars going in my direction, and it has been slow going on this trip. Alright, it's just about time to film putting together my 2024 TBR shelf, but I do have a couple of things I need to do first. You can see I've put a Christmas film on the TV, and before I can actually put together the TBR shelf, I have to clean off this, which is where I'm going to put it. This ledge has become a collection point for all of the smaller miscellaneous Christmas decorations that I have not yet put up elsewhere. So let's get those put up and then we can start sorting through some books. Alright, you join me here on the floor of my spare bedroom, which is where my bookshelves are. Same place I was sitting last year. And I am ready to start talking about what I'm going to put on my 2024 TBR shelf. Just like last year, this is not a commitment to read all of these books. As you know, I had a pretty miserable reading year this year. I am only on the 5th book that I have read in 2023, and nothing has really been a home run so far. I'm hoping to get back to more of a, groove in 2024, but we're just sort of weathering that storm right now. So I have the list for Pop Sugar up on my computer, but I thought I would start by talking about the books that, regardless of whether they fit anything on this list, I'm planning to put on my TBR. And that starts with books that will look familiar to you because they were on my most anticipated books TBR. Because these are still some of the books I'm most excited to read, I want to keep putting them on the shelf just to see if I can draw my interest to them. So some books that were on that list that you won't see here because I had to give them back to the library were The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander, The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and The Magicians by Lev Grossman, all of which I'm planning to sort of keep in the back of my mind and try to read in 2024. But the other books that were on that list are still on my plans. So I'm still working my way through A Restless Truth right now by Freya Marsk, and A Power Unbound is definitely on my list for next year. Likewise, my two Aidan Thomas books, Cemetery Boys and the Sunder Trials. It was like a weird angle for my hand to go. And Babel by R.F. Kuang. Now there are two other books that are continuations from last year, or two other series of books. The first one is the Raven Cycle series. I felt really bad about this. These are some of my favorite books of all time, and I had this grand plan to reread them in September and October of 2023, but my reading slump was so bad that even though these are some of my favorite books, I couldn't get into it. I started the first book late in September. I was planning on starting it right at the beginning, and I got wrapped up in other things because I just transferred schools, and then I just couldn't get the momentum going, and I felt really sad putting it aside, but it just, because it wasn't working, because my brain wasn't there, I was just having a hard time even getting into some of my favorite books. So hopefully that changes in 2024. The other ones that are going back on, and actually the self-published author prompt is back on the 2024 Pop Sugar list. These actually do fit a Pop Sugar prompt. But these Foxhole Court books, which are also around the same time as the Raven Cycle was big online, these books were also really big, and I was obsessed with both. And I just learned this week that the author of these books, I always pronounce her name Nora Sakovic. I don't know if that's actually correct. Someone correct me if that's wrong. She is coming out with a 4th book in this series. It is from the perspective of a different character. It's from Jean's perspective. I won't say any more in case people haven't read the first 3 books, but it's about where and with what group Jean ends up after the events of the 3rd book, and what happens next for him. And that's not a character I've thought a lot about before, but I think that's going to be really exciting. I'm going to become, I said this to Florence, I said I'm going to become just the worst person you know. I'm going to become insufferable whenever that 4th book drops. I think it might be next year, I don't know. But I'm going to become an insufferable human being, and I'm not sorry about it. I should be sorry, or I'm not sorry. I've sort of gone down the first row, or the first column, of categories for Pop Sugar, and I've made some choices here. I'll show you what I'm putting on and what I have on my piles that I'm not going to put on. First of all, I actually do have another book that I'm going to add to my list of want to read it this year, even if it doesn't fit one of these prompts. I said last year I did an Earthsea reread back in 2020, and for some reason I stopped before I got to the final book. So I'd really like to sort of, put a final stamp on that reread. And then I have a few others, probably some more on my shelf that fit some of these categories. But I sort of went with what I could see immediately, and then I'll just keep adding as I notice more things. So one of the categories was a book from a genre you typically avoid. And this is going to be interesting because this is a genre that theoretically I am really interested in, but I do rarely read it. I think I get nervous about it. I'm convinced that whenever I make a choice in this genre that it's going to be something that I don't like or that's going to make me really uncomfortable. And so I second guess the stuff I read in it so much that I'll just almost never end up reading it. That genre is horror, and one of the only horror books I have is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. So I'm going to put that back on the list. That was on the list last year too. A book about pirates is a category I'm super excited about, but I realize I don't actually own a lot of pirate books. I do have a nonfiction pirate book on my Goodreads TBR, so I could also look for that one. But probably the biggest candidate among books that I own is Peter and the Starcatchers by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson. Obviously, I also like Peter Pan, so that's kind of a good choice. I do also, though, own The Pirates in an Adventure with Communists, so if I want something a little shorter, I could do that. There is a category for a book by a deaf or hard of hearing author. I never got around in 2023 to reading Deaf Utopia, which is Niall DeMarco's memoir, so that's on the list. There is a category for a book about a writer, and I am really shocked to find that I can't seem to find a lot of books about writers or with main characters who are writers that I have on my list. I don't know, I must have more of them, but I can't seem to locate them. But I do have Stephen King's memoir on writing, so, you know, I could always do that. A Bildungsroman or coming-of-age novel was one of the first categories on the list. And I pulled 4 options and narrowed it down to 2. The 2 I'm going to discard are Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I read this once. I want to read it again just to, like, be sure, but I didn't love it. It wasn't bad. It made like no impression on me at all. And it took me a while to get into it. I eventually got into it by listening to Lin-Manuel Miranda's audiobook version, but even then I was kind of like, oh, it's fine. And then this one I picked up at Barnes & Noble, I think it was, a long time ago. It's the Yonelasi Writing Camp for Girls. And I did actually read this one before too. I'm not sure why I'm saving it to read again. It was fine. But I thought it was going to be different than it was. It's not erotica, because it's not erotic, right? It's not, like, titillating. But it did get, like, explicitly sexual in places where I wasn't expecting it, and I don't think that's what I wanted. It's not a bad thing in books. I have read plenty of books that have explicit scenes that I really like. But this one, I was just like, that was not where I expected it to go, and I don't think it was where I wanted it to go. So we're going to put that one back too. So the 2 coming-of-age novels that I kept are both classic rereads from, like, middle and early high school. They're real standbys. One is The Giver by Lois Lowry, and one is A Separate Piece by John Knowles. Okay, this is going to be the last batch we do for now, both because I am losing light and because I have to leave in a few minutes to drop by my parents' house before I meet Florence for dinner and the play. So, I went down the second column, and I have some more choices. We might have to do some narrowing down for these too. There's a category for a book with magical realism. The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende is always a good choice for that. Maggie Stiefvater's All the Crooked Saints also fits. So those are on the list. What is this one? Oh, this is a book with a title that is a complete sentence, right? Isn't that what it says? Sorry, I have to scroll a little bit. Yes, a book with a title that is a complete sentence. Here are some options. I Kissed Shara Wheeler. I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Mackay. One of my favorite books in the world, No One Is Here Except All of Us. And then Bernie Sanders, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. For now, I'm going to put these 2 on sort of a maybe, these 2. and put I have some questions for you and I Kissed Shara Wheeler on the shelf, and because this one obviously I've already read because it's a favorite of mine, and this one is nonfiction. My dad gave this to me and I do want to read it, but I'm not as big of a nonfiction fan, so a lot of nonfiction books are going to get put on the maybe list, and if I have room, I'll add more. We have a book that takes place in the snow, and Green Glass House fits that. So anytime you see me leaning over like this, it's because I'm scrolling on my laptop. So a book set in the snow, Green Glass House, also a dad recommendation. We have a book, option for a book set in the future. This Is How You Lose the Time War fits that. And a book I read and loved in 6th grade, The White Mountains, also fits because it says it takes place a century hence, which is basically 100 years from whenever you're reading this. This wasn't actually on this column, I just saw it and knew that there was a category for it, a nonfiction book about Indigenous people. I have Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. So that's definitely going on. A book set in space. I picked this one up, Halfway Home by Hugh Howey, from a little free library, so I might try that one. I also, at the yard sale this year, found C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. I can't remember how long I've wanted to read these. It was probably like high school or college when I learned that C.S. Lewis of Narnia fame had also done a like science fiction trilogy, and they sound really cool. So that's definitely going on the list. And then we also have a category for a book with at least 3 POVs. I have 3 books that I feel like are the same premise 3 times, this idea of like these common themes recurring in like a past, a present, and a future setting. So I don't know if it's like essentially the same book 3 times, but I'm going to put all 3 of them on the list and decide where I want to start. So Sea of Tranquility, Cloud Atlas, and Cloud Cuckoo Land are all that same setup. And I've heard great things about literally all three of them. So I feel like no matter where I start in that, I can't lose. So you know what that means. Happy Christmas Eve. I was a little too tired when I got back from the play last night to finish working my way through this TBR shelf. Play was amazing, by the way. It always is. It's a one-man version of A Christmas Carol. He has been doing the production at this local theater for 14 years. I've been going for 8 consecutive years, 9 total if you count the very first year that he did it at a different theater. And one day I'll tell the story of how I got to be doing that. But for now, while I finish my morning tea, I wanted to just do a couple more selections for the TBR shelf. So for the other categories that I'm seeing here, I'm having a hard time finding things that are already on my shelf that would work. This is there's a lot of really niche prompts this year that I don't own books for. So I'm going to be doing a lot of library searching, I think, this year when I'm working my way through this challenge. There's also a bunch of prompts in here that I'm going to be real with you, I'm just not going to consciously look for them. I'm going to check that prompt off if it turns out that I find one. So like a book with a 24-year-old main character, or a book with 24 letters in the title. I am not going to sit here counting letters. I will count the letters of the books that I choose as I choose them, and if they fit that, I will use it for that category. But there are a couple books I did I did pull off the shelf to add. So an LGBTQ plus romance novel. This is a book that Florence gave me for Christmas last year. It's called The Key to You and Me by J. Robin Brown. And this is a romance about, it looks like a girl who rides horses. So she goes to this small town in North Carolina to train because she is an equestrian and she wants to ride in the Olympics. And she meets this small town girl while she's there. And, you know, romance develops. We also have a category here for a book of poetry that is a collection of at least 24 poems. And I have a few of those, especially actually on my shelf of teaching materials. But we all knew that if I was going to choose one, it was going to be Devotions by Mary Oliver. I love Mary Oliver. So all the rest of the categories in this third column, I just didn't really pick anything for, either because I didn't have it, or I wasn't sure if I had it or not. There is fiction book by a trans or non-binary author, so I'll use one of my Aiden Thomas's for that. The only two other books I pulled off the shelf right now are these two books, which are like sort of daily affirmations or passages, and I was thinking of trying to start one or both of these this year. So this one is A Year of Self-Care, which has suggestions for things you can do every day for self-care or little affirmations that you can repeat to yourself. And then this one is Shakespeare Every Day of the Year, which is a passage from Shakespeare, a monologue or a small passage for every single day of the year. When I think about other things that I want to read this year, again, the direction is fairly vague because my main goal is just to read 10 books this year, since I only read 4.5 so far. Like, maybe I'll get to 5 if I finish this book on winter break. So my main goal is just, like, get to 10 books. What I want to read, like, is hard to parse out. I have those anticipated books, plus the stuff that I'm pulling for this challenge. But really, I don't even know where I'm going to start. Like, I don't know what I'm in the mood for. I'm not very in touch with my reading moods. I'm very indecisive. But I do also know that one thing I don't own that I want to make sure is on this list is, in 2022, the first book that I read, or at least the first book that I started, I don't think it was the first one that I finished, was a book by Connie Willis called Blackout. And that is a time travel story about a group of people in the year, I think, 2060, who are sort of like they're historians, like history graduate students, who are at, I believe, Oxford University, and this is in the future, and they have access to time travel as like graduate historians. And so they are going back to World War II to do research in their little niche, like, graduate research fields. And they get stuck in, like, 1943 or something like that. And there is a sequel to it that wraps it up called All Clear, and I really want to get to that. It's been 2 years now, so like my memory of what happened in Blackout is a little bit vague, but I do want to finish off that series if I can find the time. So this is the final TBR shelf as it stands right now. As you can see, once I move these Christmas decorations in January, there will be room for more if I want to add some more options. But this is what it looks like right now. That looks exciting to me. And with that, that is my last video of 2023, unless I decide to do like a New Year's resolutions video or something, which I don't think I'll do. I mean, I think I kind of will need a break, some time to rest after the chaos of Vlogmas and the chaos of this fall in general. But in case I don't see you, have a wonderful holiday. As I told my students, be safe, relax, have fun, and I will see you all in 2024. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Oh, my tea.